I got it in my eye. I got water in my eye. What was I saying? Hello and welcome back to another episode of Screen Tested. I am your host Tyrant, where we take things from movies, TV shows, pop culture, try to create them in the real world and test them one-on-one from the media they come from. Now in today's episode we're going to be taking a look at another one of the big three god weapons, Hades Bident or Varatha, or even the Evangelion Spear if that's what you want to call it. Now the last time we did this we took a look at Zeus's lightning bolt, more specifically the zigzag design. Is it a good throwing weapon? Does it have any good aerodynamics as seen in popular culture? And obviously in today's episode we're moving on to Hades. Now like I said in the original episode, I'm a huge fan of god weapons. I love god weapons. I don't care what media they're from, I really enjoy them. So once we get done with Varatha in today's episode, that means we're going to be moving on to Poseidon's Trident. But that is another episode for another day. For now, let's get started with the build because it should be a whole lot of fun. So I'm going to be recycling the lightning bolt. I'm going to be chopping it up and turning it into the Bident or Varatha. And then after that, I'm also going to turn that into the trident. So that means I'm going to make all three of the god weapons out of the original god weapon. I think that's really cool. Personally, I think that's cool. But to get started with the build, I'm going to throw the lightning bolt onto my brand new anvil and quickly straighten up some of the points and edges as it got a little bit damaged last time we tested it. Then I'm going to grab one of the angle grinders and cut it into different pieces. So after we've chopped up the lightning bolt, I'm then going to chuck those pieces onto the grinder to trim up any of the edges, getting them all prepared for welding. I also need to create an extra few parts because obviously this is no longer a solid metal piece. I need to put it onto a wooden handle. I need to create kind of that connection point between the wood handle and the tip of the spear or the tip of Varatha. Then I'm going to take all those individual parts out to be welded. Now you guys know that I am not a professional welder at all, and a grinder and paint makes me the welder. I ain't. After all those pieces are welded together, I will then grab the angle grinder and then cover it in some paint, attach it to the haft, and it is ready for testing. So here we have our Hades Bident or Varatha or the Evangelion Spear, whatever you want to call it. It is a two-pronged thrusting device. And here it is. First off, I actually really like it. Second off, it's really hot today and I am sweating like a motherfucker. So if you see water pouring from my head and face, that's why. It is very hot right now. Anyway, so let's talk a little bit about this thing because I think, just preambling, this may be one of the highest rated things we get. Like, obviously we've got to test it, we've got to see how it actually fares, but there's a lot going on here. So, in terms of a thrusting device, I mean, it's very similar to a spear. Now, you might be thinking, well, how do you aim it? Because the center of your aim is not in line with the tines. However, there's an easy way around that, especially when it comes to the aiming portion. That is just to rotate it like this. Then it thrusts exactly like a normal spear. So if I wanted to hit that, that's all I had to do. That was cool. Did you get that? In terms of aiming, it's actually exactly the same as a spear. Hold it like this and you get it on point. Now, what I think is interesting about this sort of design, whether we want to call it the Bident, Varatha, whatever it is, I think there's a use case for it. Now, do I think it's as good as perhaps like a spear, right? Honestly, no, I don't think it's as deadly as a spear, but I do think that this has a couple of different uses. First off, when I think about how I would use this thing, I think if I wanted to, let's say, restrain a large beast, and I wanted the option of lethality, but at the same time having a large portion to hold something down. For example, maybe it's like I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, like a snake, maybe a wolf, something like that. I think this could perform well. I think that that is a good option. Now, in terms of its lethality, because it's essentially a two-pronged spear, there are a couple of downsides. There are a couple of downsides. That being, obviously, it shares the destructive capabilities between the two prongs. You're halving your penetrative power. However, that might not actually be such a bad thing. For example, if I wanted, let me grab that before it empties complete. Oh shit! Oh, I got it in my eye. I got water in my eye. If you're enjoying today's episode, why don't you consider subscribing? I literally have a giant sword and hammer. That's the type of content that I do around here. So if you're enjoying it, why don't you subscribe? Like there, yeah. Do that. Do that, guys. One more for luck. Beautiful. All right, back to what I was saying. What was I saying? What was I saying, Marcus? So one of the biggest negatives about something like this design, I see, is that you're sharing the destructive capabilities of your spike between two. Same sort of thing at play with like the Wolverine claws. You're halving the destructive capability. However, the reason why I don't think that's too much of a negative in this particular context is because you have such a long haft, you have a whole lot more leverage. So for example, let me grab Tony. Now, even when I strike Tony, I'm going to be sharing the surface area of this, but because I have two hands on it and I have so much more leverage, I can do that. So honestly, I don't think it's that bad. I'm going to be a bit extra right now. Sometimes I can do things just because I kind of want to, but it's not a good idea. I shouldn't have done that. So in terms of a god weapon, right? I mean, it's just basically a little bit worse version of a spear. So that's still pretty good. There's a reason why the spear is called the king of the battlefield for a reason. So when it comes to something like this, it being just a little bit worse is really not that big of a deal. Man, that is so fun. This thing is fun. I'm not gonna lie, guys. It is so hot. My brain is fried right now. I don't know if you can you hear that? I wonder if the mic can. It's making like a whistle sound. I know you guys want to see me throw it, so let's do a couple of throws here at Tony. Got him in the neck. That went straight through the fencing mask gorge. Straight through. There's not too much to say on the Bident or Varatha, whatever we want to call it. Hades Tine. Do they call them tines? I feel like that's a fork. Anyway, there's not too much to say. It's kind of a worse spear, but even a worse spear is still a really good weapon. So, while we're at it, why don't we get into Tyrant's initial thoughts, score, or tits for short. Starting off with something easy, comfort. 10 out of 10. I mean, it's the exact same as a spear. It is very comfortable, very wieldable, very usable. 10 out of 10. I got like literally zero complaints, especially when I was hitting things, felt wicked. So next up, let's get up to something like effectiveness. Now this one's a bit of an interesting one because I don't think it's a 10 out of 10 for effectiveness because remember, we're comparing apples to apples. So this would go against something like a spear. Now a spear in this category, 10 out of 10. King of the battlefield for a reason. This one, I think a fair score for it is 9 out of 10. Now the reason why I think that is simply because in terms of effectiveness, in terms of deadliness, a spear is simply more deadly. This, because you have the two tines, it means that they're sharing that surface area, like halving the amount of force between the two points. So I think a 9 is fair here. It's still incredibly deadly and still incredibly effective, but just not as effective as a single spike. Next up, let's get to the design. Now, this is another interesting one because Again, I think that it depends what you're going for, right? If your design, the point of it is to be the most deadly weapon humanly possible for this sort of configuration, a spear, really f***ing good. A halberd, really f***ing good. Something like this, it's still way up there, but I don't know if it's a 10 out of 10. I mean, I would call it a 10 out of 10. You know what? I would call it a 10 out of 10 because it depends what you want when it comes to the design. For something like this, there are aspects to it that I really like. I like the fact that we have these two tines that stop it from going any further than the bottom point of the points. And like, again, if I was hunting a monster, I actually think it's really good because if I wanted to hold something down, I don't have to use one point. I can kind of use the middle of the point and restrain things. So when it comes to the design, I really like it. 10 out of 10. I got no complaints about it. That leaves us wieldability next. The 10 out of 10. Like, it's exactly the same wieldableness as a spear. It's very wieldable, very good for thrusting, very good for pointing and poking things. Who would have thought? So that gives us a final score of 39 out of 40. Can't remember if we've given other things 39 out of 40. Either way, it's one of the highest things that we have rated. Like I said, it's basically just a little bit worse than a spear, not by much. And I really dig it. I think it's really, really fun, and I like it. I'm a fan of this one. I'm a fan of Varatha or Hades Bident or the Evangelion Spear. Whatever we want to call it, it's really f***ing cool. You know what that means? We slap a seal on it. It is screen tested, approved. But I think that's going to be all for today's short episode, guys. I genuinely hope you enjoyed. My brain is absolutely fried from this heat. Thanks for watching. As always, you can check out my Patreon and my channel memberships down below if you want to support the channel. But that's going to be all for now. Thanks for watching. And as always, I'll see you next week in another episode. Have a good one.